Welcome, everyone, to the NoDQ.com live recap of AEW Dynamite for March 12th, 2025. Shout out to Walter and everybody else in the chat room for watching live. I appreciate your viewership and support. We are coming off the AEW Revolution pay-per-view. We have another one coming up, AEW Dynasty, and we started to get build up for that. After I finish recapping Dynamite, I will also give my thoughts on NXT Roadblock, which was on Tuesday night. But first, we will discuss Dynamite. We kicked off the show with the new AEW International Champion, Kenny Omega, who said he is not only back, but now he has a singles championship. He thanked Konosuke Takeshita for pushing him to the limit. Then he talked about this Dynasty Eliminator Tournament. We have a tournament. We have 8 wrestlers that will be competing, and then the 4 that win their matches will go on next week to compete in a fatal 4-way, and the winner of that will face Kenny Omega at Dynasty. Spoiler alert, I think Kenny Omega will be winning at Dynasty. He wants to face the best, and the way to do this is apparently a tournament. So there you go. I'm not opposed to tournaments. I just feel like there's too many of them. WWE does too many. AEW does too many. And then later on in the show, there was talk about another tournament. We'll get to that in just a little bit. We had the Ops, Samoa Joe, Shibata, and Hook winning a quick squash match. It was Shibata that got the pin because he is scheduled for a match with Ricochet on Collision. Ricochet cut a backstage promo, and he was giving Shibata a chance to forfeit. Now, of course, I don't think we are going to see a forfeit, but my feeling is Ricochet will be picking up the win on Collision. My gut feeling is Ricochet will be winning this little tournament and facing Omega, but we'll see. Next up, we had a promo from Swerve Strickland, which was right after Revolution. He talked about how he won the world title at Dynasty last year, and he vowed to do it again this year at Dynasty. Then Adam Copeland approached him. Copeland brought up how he did not lose at Revolution. It was Christian that got beat, not him. And Copeland said maybe it'll be Swerve versus Copeland at Dynasty, because it was confirmed that next week it will be Jon Moxley versus Adam Copeland in a street fight for the AEW World Championship. Hell of a main event for next week's show. This week, not so much, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. We had a tag team match. We had Meaty Man and Luchador teaming up against another Meaty Man and another Luchador. We had Hologram and Powerhouse Hobbs versus Brian Cage and Dralistico. Brian Cage in a match on Dynamite. You know what that means. They started brawling. We had some order restored. You had Dralistico pulling at the mask of Hologram. Hologram then went for a dive over the top, but Brian Cage caught him and then suplexed him on the floor. And then afterwards, we had interference from the Beast Mortos, but then we had Harley Graham, which is Harley Cameron, with the Lucha mask. She distracted Mortos, and I think that's pretty effective. She can definitely distract some men if she wanted to. Then Hobbs got the hot tag, but then Brian Cage regained the upper hand. He did the big suplex, bringing Hobbs back into the ring. always looks impressive, but you ultimately know what Brian Cage's fate is. Now, at least he didn't take the pin. Hobbs did get back control, and then he pinned Dralistico with the spine buster. Nonetheless, Brian Cage takes another L on AEW Dynamite. I mean, he really is AEW's Austin Theory or Grayson Waller. Like, he's just there to lose. That is Brian Cage's role in the company. He looks like $1 million. He's powerful. He does cool stuff, but he always loses in the big matches. Afterwards, we had Lance Archer and Mark Davis having words with Hobbs. So I guess they're going to keep feuding. Hobbs should really be doing more than feuding with these guys, just saying. We then had another promo from After Revolution, this time from the Hurt Syndicate. Basically, MJF told Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin to take the week off, enjoy California, enjoy some women, have a good time. And that's what they did. We had a recap of the Toni Storm and Mariah May match from Revolution, and then Toni cut a promo. I liked the promo. She had a cool shot with different images of her, kind of like a mirror. And she talked about how she had glass in her ass. She said, however, despite that, the tramp is still the champ. She was rhyming a lot. She said it's a new beginning. She said she will eat people like a lion. However, they're not going to hear her meow because she's no pussy. And then Megan Bayne attacked her from behind and left her laying. Number one, it was an interesting promo from Toni. My wife was like, she's so weird. And then number two, we know the first person who will challenge Toni now that the feud with Mariah May is over. By the way, no sign of Mariah May. I'm not sure what's next for her. Guess we'll have to wait and see. Next match was one of our tournament matches in this Dynasty Eliminator series. We had Mortos versus the debuting Speedball Mike Bailey. Now, this is actually not the first time I've seen Mike Bailey wrestle. I saw him at Bound for Glory, TNA Bound for Glory last year in Detroit. And I was fairly impressed with him. He's a good cruiserweight. Now, my concern is he'll end up getting lost in the shuffle like every other guy in AEW. He'll get his push for a couple weeks and then he'll basically be on Collision every week. We'll see if I'm wrong, though. But yeah, he does stand out a little bit. Martial artist, does a lot of kicks. And Mortos with the power. Got in a little bit of offense, but it was mostly a showcase match for the newcomer, Mike Bailey. And they did trade a few near falls, but then Speedball hit his spinning kick and got the 1-2-3 victory. Matthew thinks he's basically just the new babyface Ricochet. Time will tell. But a nice start for him. Picks up the win, and he advances to next week's Fatal 4-Way. Next up, we had Christian Cage interviewed backstage by Renee Paquette, but he didn't want to talk to her because she's related to Jon Moxley. So she left, and then he said he's still the next AEW World Champion. He demanded that his contract be returned to him. He said it was supposed to be one-on-one, and then Moxley put on an illegal choke. Then Nick Wayne interrupted and said Christian did not stick to the plan and needed to apologize to the patriarchy. So Christian responded by shoving him, getting in his face, getting nose to nose, and warning him to never act up again. And also, of course, brought up Nick's deceased father because that's what Christian does. Looks like we're going to get Christian versus Nick Wayne. Not sure. I mean, they teased Wheeler Yuta leaving Jon Moxley, and that didn't happen. So we'll see where this goes. We had MJF footage from after he lost to Hangman Adam Page at Revolution. And MJF was seen smashing a mirror with his fist. Then he came to the ring and he cut a promo. said that it was a fluke victory from Paige, and MJF said things are not over, not by a long shot. But then MVP came down by himself. Lashley and Benjamin had the night off. MVP, he started talking about how when MJF was 18 years old, MJF would drive MVP around, ask him questions about the wrestling business. MVP said he was proud of MJF. However, he said that MJF has lost his edge. Whatever happened to MJF hurting people? MVP said that people do not fear MJF anymore. And he said he helped MJF before. Maybe he could help him again. And he offered his business card, the golden ticket. But MJF lowered the card, said he doesn't need MVP's help. And he said he was AEW champion for over 400 days. MVP responded by saying the key word there, the focus, is the word was. And at this point, MJF took the card, and I guess we'll see where this goes. I will say this was the best segment on the show. The one segment that I actually felt intrigued about, like I'm curious as to where they'll go with this. Is MJF going to be what the Owen Hart was to the Nation of Domination? Or will he defy them? Will Hurt Syndicate turn babyface? Like, there's a couple possibilities for this. All right. Looks like I'm back. Not sure if I cut out or not. All right. Let's move on to the next segment, which was a Max Caster promo. And he tried to get the crowd to chant that he's the best wrestler alive. Of course, they did not do that. It's an intentionally complicated line to say. It's a mouthful. And then Takeshita answered the challenge. Max Caster continued to trash talk and said that maybe he could do something Takeshita could not do, and that's beat Omega. Takeshita punched him and then hit him with the Raining Fire to get the win. Takeshita, after losing, picks up a victory over AEW's version of Giovanni Vinci in 2024. That's what it was. We then had Chris Jericho backstage with Gravity's mask, and he told Bandito that Bandito's life has changed forever, and that's a bad thing, and you don't cross Chris Jericho and get on his bad side, yada, yada, yada. Jericho crumpled up the mask and dropped it. Man, I do not care about this whatsoever. I have no interest in Chris Jericho versus Bandito. If Chris Jericho disappeared from TV, I would not care. I really wouldn't. I feel like he serves no purpose at this point. Next up, we had our women's match at 9:30. Willow Nightingale versus Penelope Ford. Match was all right. It was solid, but it's in the usual spot on the show. Kind of just, we must have the women on the card, so we're going to throw them in there at 9:30. Ford did get in some offense. She had a stunner to Willow, and then Willow countered a second stunner, pinned her with the pounce, and then after the match was over, Ford took a page out of the Hulk Hogan playbook, and she hit Willow with one of the weakest chair shots I've seen in a while. Then Chris Statlander ran out there to make the save, only for Megan Bayne to show up and attack both Statlander and Willow, double clothesline, and then she gave Statlander the F5. Well, I mean, at least something was productive here. You built up Megan Bayne a little bit as a contender for Toni Storm. There you go. Then we had the TBS champion, Mercedes Moné, backstage, and she was selling a kick to the throat from Momo at Revolution, and she could barely talk. But then Billy Starks came in and confronted Mercedes and said she's looking to be champion. And we had a match set up for next week, Mercedes versus Billy Starks. Another person for Mercedes to beat. Then we had Tony Schiavone interviewing Will Ospreay. Ospreay coming off the match with Kyle Fletcher. Very great cage match. He thanked the fans for helping him through the feud. And then he said that one day Fletcher will be a champion, a future world champion. He called him. Ospreay said he got in some trouble with his wife for jumping off the top of the cage, but he was able to fix things with her. Then he brought up how he wants the AEW World Championship. However, Cope and Swerve have upcoming matches. So when does he call his shot? Well, he said he's going to call his shot for when it matters the most. And he turned around and looked up at the AEW All-In graphic. And he said he is going to enter this year's Owen Hart tournament. He said the assassin is coming for the throne. Now, I'm all for this idea, entering the Owen tournament to get the All-In title shot. A couple of things, though, I have to say. First of all, that's 4 months away. Does that mean Jon Moxley is going to be the world champion until July? That's a little crazy. I'm not sure I'm happy with that. And then the other thing, granted, they do this tournament every year, but same show, they have this tournament for Kenny Omega's title. Couldn't they have just done a fatal four-way or do qualifying matches? I guess that's a tournament, though, so I don't know. I just feel like there's too many tournaments, and to be fair, WWE also does too many tournaments, so I'm not just calling out AEW for this. I just feel like there's too many tournaments. My guess is Ospreay will be going All In to challenge for the world title now that he's put it out there in the universe, which I'm all for. I think that's a right call, but I'm hoping Swerve will beat Moxley at this point. I don't think it's going to be Cope. We had Jay White backstage, and he talked about Will Ospreay's comments, and, you know, in order for that to happen, AEW will have to protect Ospreay from White, and then White vowed to become the number one contender for the world title. He's still on that mission, and also made it clear he did not purposely attack Copeland. Siri, I wasn't talking to you. So I'm not sure how Siri got triggered by me just talking here, but Siri did. Siri, go away. Siri, stop. All right, let's move on here. We had Hangman Adam Page backstage with MJF, and Page said that he didn't believe MJF was seriously going to set him on fire. And also Page said that he believes MJF actually cares about the people. And MJF responded. First of all, he said Page smelled like ass, so he backed off a little bit. Said he's going to become world champion again, while Page will tumble down the mountain just like he always does. And MJF said he'll be laughing at Page all the way to the top of the mountain. MJF has two storylines, I guess, one with Page, one with MVP. I'm intrigued about the MVP stuff. We'll see what happens. We had our main event of Dynamite. World caliber match, main event quality. We had Orange Cassidy versus Hechicero. What? This is not Rampage. Why is this the Dynamite main event? Like, really? This is like Otis versus Eddie Thorpe. as the main event of Monday Night Raw. Imagine that. Imagine that. Otis versus Eddie Thorpe is your Monday Night Raw main event. Really? And I'm thinking there's got to be some kind of a catch here, some sort of a major event at the end of this show. You had Jim Ross on commentary. You would use Jim Ross for this? Jim Ross can't really do much these days. He calls a match every now and then, and this is what you bring him in for? Orange Cassidy versus Hechicero? What? Anyways, Orange Cassidy was walking the ropes, walking one side, and then he walked the other side. Hechicero is just standing there holding him up. Just immediately pulled the guy down. I know Undertaker did it, but it was at least a little bit more credible when Undertaker did it. Hechicero got the upper hand for a while. And, of course, eventually Orange Cassidy picked up the win with the cradle. And then afterwards, we did have our little post-match moment. Speedball. Mike Bailey came out there and had a little face-off with Orange Cassidy. That was our cliffhanger for next week. You would think they would have closed it out with Moxley and Copeland. Instead, I think Moxley just cut a little backstage promo early on in the show. I might have actually forgotten to talk about it because it was, one of those typical Moxley rambling promos. This was in the beginning of the show, like second or third segment. He said he underestimated Adam Copeland and he was gonna throw out the rules and therefore there would be no more excuses for Cope next week. But they should have done an angle at the end to hook people for next week. I mean, what the hell? Anyways, pretty weak Dynamite to follow up Revolution, I have to say. It wasn't that good. Like, it wasn't terrible, but I thought it was a fairly forgettable show. Other than the MJF MVP segment, like, there's nothing I'll remember a week from now. So I'm going with 4 out of 10 for Dynamite. Yeah, not my favorite episode. I feel bad for the fans in Fresno. Next week, we're getting a world title match and a street fight, but these fans got Orange Cassidy and Hechicero as their main event. Seems a bit unfair, if you ask me. Yeah, I mean, AEW, how hard is it to have like one big marquee match close out your show? Like, why would you put Orange Cassidy versus Hechicero in this spot? I mean, hell, give the women a main event spot. I mean, they could have done like Megan Bayne versus Mariah May, winner faces Toni Storm, something like that. Give Mariah May one more shot, or put Megan Bayne against Willow Nightingale, number 1 contenders match, or something like that as your main event. Give the women the main event if you're going to, if you need something for your main event. I don't know. Very weird to me. This is not exactly how you build your audience, but I guess Tony Khan is confident that this contract with Warner Brothers Discovery is going to last, and that he's in no danger of getting thrown off the air if the ratings get real low. I don't know. I hope Matty isn't around. He's not going to be happy with this recap. 4 out of 10. It was not terrible, but kind of lackluster. All right, so real quick, I will give my thoughts on NXT Roadblock from the theater at Madison Square Garden. Awesome venue. I believe, I might be wrong on this, but I think Owen Hart and Ken Shamrock at SummerSlam was in the theater. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. In 98, I believe they had their Lion's Den match in the theater. This is a cool venue. I love how it looked on TV. I love the lighting, the lights, the laser lights or whatever they had above the ring. Looked really cool. And the matches were all really good. You had Jordynne Grace beating Roxanne Perez. I think Roxanne's on the main roster now. I presume this was her last match, putting over Jordan on the way out. You had the Hardys versus Fraxium. Very good match here with these two teams. And for the finish, you had Axiom accidentally hitting Frazier, and the Hardys picked up the win. And then they cut a backstage promo. This was only for the TNA titles, which kind of gave away who was going to win. And then the Hardys said they want a shot at the NXT tag team titles, which, again, I think it kind of gives away if this match happens, Fraxium will get their win back. A little predictable, but, it's cool. We're getting the Hardys and NXT mixing it up with the NXT stars. I think that's cool. We also had a couple legends on the show. Mickie James had a backstage segment with Jada Parker. Good to have Mickie James around, and she's part of that Legends and Future Greats show. We had Undertaker backstage with Oba Femi, basically putting over Oba, saying he's impressed with him and told Oba to defend his yard. Cool of Undertaker, giving the rub to Oba. And we had Javon Evans versus Ethan Page in a street fight. Another good match here. Javon Evans is awesome. He's a human highlight reel. He does a lot of cool stuff. At one point, Ethan Page was standing on the apron. Javon jumped over the top rope and gave Page a cutter through a table that was set up. And then for the finish, Javon did this springboard cutter to Page while Page had a chair wrapped around his neck. Evans is great. I mean, you could definitely make some videos of him doing all sorts of cool stuff. Future definitely seems bright for him. Then we had Oba Femi versus Moose. And this was not a title for title match, only the NXT World Championship. Again, kind of gives it away who's winning. Part of me wishes they would put both titles on the line, but I feel like they're not going to take it that far. It was a good match, hard hitting with both of these guys. One of the highlights was Moose putting Femi through the announce table with the Uranagi, and then he got Femi back in the ring, hit him with the big spear, but Femi kicked out, and then Femi picked up the win with the power bomb. No real surprise here. Oba Femi is a beast. Dude definitely can be the next Brock Lesnar. Like, he's got the it factor. And Moose had a solid showing as well. I know some people are saying, oh, look at TNA, they're getting buried. I mean, TNA is getting a ton of exposure out of this, and you really can't believe that a TNA guy is going to beat the NXT World Champion. It's just not going to happen. And the Hardys did win. Although it's kind of funny because the Hardys, they're WWE guys. They're in TNA right now, but when you think of the Hardys, you think WWE. So, of course, the one TNA act that beats the WWE act, they're WWE guys. I just find it funny, but this is what it was going to be. Anybody expecting, TNA is going to come in and beat the WWE guys, it's not really going to happen. We then had our main event, the women getting the main event spot. There you go. Julia versus Stephanie Vakir. Now, there were reports that Julia was hurt, able to do the match, but she was going to take time off, and it was basically a spoiler here. But it was a very good match, and if I didn't know this report about Julia, I wouldn't have thought anything. Like, she seemed to wrestle just fine. Very competitive match with both of them. They will one day wrestle on the main roster, and I'm calling it. I think one day you will see them compete for the World Championship at WrestleMania. I mean, they both have a very bright future ahead of them, and it was back and forth, and Stephanie had to pull out all the stops. She had to hit her finisher like 3 times to get the win, and she did in fact beat Julia to become a double champion. So I presume she's going to relinquish the North American Championship. But yeah, really strong ending to the show. Their futures are very bright. Stephanie's going to be a big deal, and I think Julia will as well. And all in all, Roadblock was a very good show. I mean, NXT has definitely picked up some momentum in recent months, and you have a lot of strong acts that have bright futures. Stephanie, really the women's division is very strong in NXT, and Obafemi has some real upper card potential in WWE. Javon Evans will probably be a solid middle card act in WWE, but he definitely has a bright future as well. So yeah, that was my thoughts on Roadblock. Pretty good show. I enjoyed it. Love the venue. I hope they'll do more there. And that's it for my recaps of Dynamite and Roadblock. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Tell a friend on YouTube. Next week, we got Copeland versus Moxley. I'll be recapping that. Hopefully things pick up for AEW. No, I actually do not even have access to watch NXT live because Sling doesn't carry the CW. I can't even watch it live without watching an illegal stream, and I'm not going to do that. So I can't even watch the show live to recap it if I wanted to. So the answer to that is no, JJ, but I will continue to watch the premium live events and recap those. Thank you guys again. Much love and appreciation to all of you. Take care, everybody. Say yes to NoDQ.com, and I will see you all next time.